Hello, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's online civil rights and social justice performance and discussion. We are so excited and so happy to have you be a part of this today. My name is Francisca Beltran, and I'm a community outreach coordinator for the Lincoln Commission on Human Rights. The Lincoln Commission on Human Rights is responsible for preventing and responding to all forms of illegal discrimination in the city of Lincoln. We also work to assure and foster equal opportunity for all citizens of the city. One of LCHR's main education and outreach events is our Civil Rights Conference, which we host every year. This year, we were set to host our 19th annual Civil Rights Conference in Nebraska Innovation Campus here in Lincoln. However, due to recent COVID risk dial spike, it prevented us from safely meeting in person. While most of our conference speakers, panels, and presentations will happen at next year's Civil Rights Conference, which will be April 20th, 2022, at Nebraska Innovation Campus, we are offering some of the programming from this year's conference safely via this online platform. Today's program is brought to you by many of our collaborating partners whom you'll meet in a moment. However, initially, we do want to thank Humanities for Nebraska for their funding. Humanities for Nebraska is a statewide nonprofit organization which inspires and enriches personal and public life by offering opportunities to thoughtfully engage with history and culture. Additional funding from the Nebraska Cultural Endowment. If you enjoy this type of programming, please consider supporting Humanities for Nebraska with a contribution. Donations are matched by state and federal funds. Your support helps preserve our past and inform our future. So next we have to open up this wonderful program is a word from our wonderful mayor, Larry Gayer Baird, who for today has continued her support on this event and continues to support the Lincoln Commission on Human Rights. The mayor and her team have done a wonderful job in continuing to keep our community informed and as safe as possible during COVID-19, as well as prioritizing equity, inclusion, and belonging to our city. So thank you, Mayor, for joining us today, and we'll hear our mayor's words.
Hi, I'm Mayor Lyrian Gaylor Baird. Thank you to the Lincoln Commission on Human Rights for organizing this Facebook Live event today. The City of Lincoln has a long tradition of bringing civil rights and social justice advocates together annually at our Civil Rights Conference. And while we are unable to gather in person today, we're so happy to have the opportunity to learn and reflect together virtually. Thank you for joining us. We are also truly grateful for and inspired by the youth performers who will soon share their messages. They are amazingly talented, and their art is made all the more profound by its rootedness in the belief that each one of us is responsible for making the next generation even more inclusive than the one that came before it. And by creating and performing art, these youth are encouraged to think about the role that they play in addressing social injustice, now and for years to come, as are we all. Today's event is about more than thinking about how we might advance social justice. It's also about equipping us with the tools we need to recognize and prevent discrimination in our everyday lives. Whether we're in public or at work or in our own homes, it's important to know our rights and understand the resources available to support ourselves and our loved ones. Thank you to everyone who has made this event possible, including Humanities Nebraska, LPS's Belmont Trax Scholars, Pete Ferguson, the Omaha Department of Human Rights and Relations, and Director Dr. Franklin Thompson. I also want to thank today's presenters, Joe Wilson from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and Steve Tomkowiak, HUD trainer with the Fair Housing Center of Metropolitan Detroit. We are grateful for your contributions to this event. And finally, please mark your calendar for the 2022 Civil Rights Conference, which will take place on April 20th at Innovation Campus. Until then, enjoy today's presentations and performances, which will inspire us all to pursue a more equitable and just future.
Thank you, Mayor, for those kind words. It is always nice to hear how she supports not only the Lincoln Commission on Human Rights, but our community. So with that being said, performances and messages you will hear today have a social justice, civil rights theme, and messages of empowerment. So next, we have Dr. Thompson from well, first of all, from Omaha, Nebraska. He is the director of the Omaha Human Rights and Relations Department, and every year they host a wonderful program through Omaha where they have students from Omaha public schools perform and showcase their social justice performances. So with that, thank you, Dr. Franklin Thompson, and we will hear a few words from him as he introduces the two performers that we will have today.
Hello, my name is Franklin Thompson, and I am the director of the Omaha Department of Human Rights and Relations. Each year, we do a Martin Luther King Living the Dream competition for high school students. This year, I am happy to introduce to you two of those winners, one Jules and the other Peter. And we believe in Omaha that young people have a voice and that they have something to say. And all over the news within the last 2 weeks, I think America has seen that. We like to be a partner with the Lincoln Commission on Human Rights, and we want to partner with them by introducing you, the audience, to our student winners. Here is Peter Suchsdorf and Jules Westerwald. Thank you.
My name is Peter Suchsdorf. I'm a senior at Omaha North High School, and this is my piece, Making the Dream. This piece is dedicated to all those who fought and who continue to fight to make Martin Luther King's dream possible. And this is my original composition, Dawn. This piece is dedicated to Kamala Harris, who showed our nation that this is a nation of possibility. This is a country where anyone can rise to the highest seat.
baby boy. Have you ever been told to love yourself? Or have you seen that phrase on bumper stickers, motivational posters, or even heard it in song lyrics? Love yourself, love yourself, love yourself. How can you love when the love for your own body doesn't have a physical representation? The pure distaste of your own flesh is all you can think about. Saturday, June 8th, Westroads Mall. A couple years ago, he just kept walking forward, every step echoing across the bland floors. Don't make this about you. You'll be back in a few? All right, I'll wait right here. So there he was, a baby boy standing there silently. Isn't he beautiful? He's got a deep voice and a confident mind until his words start to unwind and he will finally realize he's not the person he wishes he was. Climbing above all his mental obstacles in public opticals, his worries scurry up his arms like bugs. Give me a hug, baby boy. I'm sorry for what's about to happen. He started running towards the restroom doors. All the baby girls walked through. He stood outside, knowing the invisible barrier of labels kept him from following, along with the fear he might get yelled at by those blinded by a binded body. Stood over the water fountain. He just lost it. When he bent over to take a drink, all he could see was his chest. He should have wore a bigger t-shirt that day. He couldn't tell if the taste in his mouth was the metallic water from the fountain or the sweat dripping down his face, but he had already made his decision. Turning, he took a step towards the door. Men's. He felt it, slicing through his skin as if the dysphoria was trying to dissect the baby boy right out of him, and he could feel the thorns piercing through every vein, straining themselves around every limb like a sadistic corset. Despite all of this, he pushed the door open. His own fear comes to life. He tried to turn back around, not even a step taken when, hey, where are you going? Months later, the sound of that guy's voice still echoes in my head. All thoughts broke as I hit those cold tiles. I reached out my hand to try and break the momentum. The force of the impact broke the bracelet I was wearing. A beautiful beaded bracelet with the colors of the gender-fluid flag, with a metal butterfly pendant with wings painted the colors of the pan flag. The butterfly snapped in half and the beads bounced across the smooth floor far out of my reach. How poetic. A piece of jewelry made to represent my identity broke on impact when I was called a derogatory term and forcefully shoved into a wall in a men's bathroom. I almost broke along with my bracelet if it weren't for another baby boy. A few seconds of eye contact and I understood. Another baby boy standing there, looking completely lost, trapped in fake protection of delinquents, breathing discrimination down the necks of those conflicted by status, stuck in a bad situation. Kind of like how this baby boy felt, trapped against that wall. Worse things might have happened. Worse things do happen. How dare the rules of society make this baby boy cry? He's already trying to compress and crush his emotions the same as he does his chest. They say boys aren't supposed to cry. Then how dare they make me cry? To the teenage boys who tried to break me, you can destroy the bracelet that defines me, but you can't destroy my pride. To the boy who helped me, I hope you got out of there too. And if I ever come across you again, I'd ask you if anyone has ever told you to love yourself. Or have you seen that phrase on bumper stickers, motivational posters, or even heard it in song lyrics? Because despite everything, I love who I am. Though the boy inside feels dead while the girl outside walks alive, nothing will ever stop me from being me. Because boys don't get beat up in men's bathrooms, yet boys that look like girls on the outside do. Objective. It's past midnight on a Monday of a date I'll forget. Bored out of my mind, so I spent some time in it. Start to question the reality we all perceive. I look around and I wonder, what if objects could breathe? Would a boss gasp at the sight of a blade, uncomfortable at the thought of being forced open and having the inside components it was keeping safe taken away? Would a painting sigh when placed stagnant on a museum wall? Despite vibrant colors and being full of artistry, do paintings ever get self-conscious of all the people staring? Then I picked up my X-Acto knife, and a sudden twinge reminded me of the little slit on my finger from where it slipped the other night. I remembered how fast blood dripped down my finger and how fast I ran to get a bandage. I've never seen a paper cut bleed so much, as if a part of me was desperate to spill out. Wonder what that could mean. I shook away the thought. At the time, I just wanted to clean up. But now, here I am, staring at my X-Acto knife, and suddenly I was filled with so many questions. When talking to someone, you'll normally hear them say something along the lines of, "Ask me anything. Tell me everything." Except for some reason, I had the compulsion to ask questions to everything, hoping it would tell me anything. Hey, object, what's your objective? Piece of paper, what importance do you wish to hold? Do you feel pride when possessing the secrets of a document? Or joy when someone finds something fun to fold? Do you envy the window? Everyone gives it credit of being called that because they can view the world through them. But all creators know you're the true window into many worlds, written, drawn, or even built. Dear glass of milk, what's your favorite drink? Is there a certain one that makes you feel fulfilled? Does being empty make you feel useless? Does the never-ending cycle from the cabinet to the table to the dishwasher ever get monotonous? Are you really half empty or half full? Number 2, pencil. Do you ever feel like you're being used, not wanting to give so much of yourself for something else? I suppose your job never gets too dull. After all your hard work, you get sharpened. Or is it painful, whittled away just to function better? Or is it more painful to get lost, replaced, and probably eventually thrown away? Do clothes ever feel worn out? How would a mirror look at itself? Do locks feel safe? Do refrigerators, ovens, light bulbs ever want to change from their same mundane use of keeping things right, cold, hot, or bright? Do they really feel so all right? And we thought we had it bad being alive. How about the objects that can be responsible for ending it? Things like guns or knives. Do you think they ever know when they're in the wrong hands? Does a bullet ever feel guilty about its purpose in life? Then I turned back to my X-Acto knife. If objects had eyes, I'd wonder what they had seen. I thought about it for a while, and I'm kind of glad they don't. Not just because it would be downright creepy, but also I don't think a clipboard could be a great therapist on its own. I'm glad objects can't be blamed for what people do with them. I'm glad objects aren't like people. Because unfortunately, there are tons of people with dangerous objectives, but there are many dangerous objects. Objects are only as bad as the people who use them, but if objects think like people, then I would have to hope objects have better morals and not attempt a siege against humanity.
So, wow, what an impactful and incredible performance by Jules and Peter. It is incredible how when people feel moved with social justice and what our community has to offer, it's incredible, especially the students, how they come across to our community. And so two very talented young people. And I had the pleasure of meeting both of them, and I can't wait to see what they bring in the future for our communities. Next is Pete Ferguson, who will talk more about the MLK Youth Rally. They currently worked on a documentary, We Will Not Be Silent, an incredible and impactful documentary. So we will be joining Pete, the public school students, Desiree, Travis, and Evelyn, and the amazing teacher, Bobby Ehrlich from the Belmont Elementary School.
We're excited to be here today with Pete Ferguson, some of the scholars, and Bobby, who is joining us today via Facebook. And in reality, this session will be part of our social justice program, who will also have 2 students from Omaha Public Schools. And I'm excited to be here with them and to talk a little bit more about the Youth Rally and March Committee that Desiree and Evelyn are part of, and to see a snippet of a film that was made earlier in the year that really talks about and kind of showcases what the students go through, how they get ready to do this march in combination with Pete and Bobby, and with what they're learning as they're going through this. And it's all about a book that they choose every year to act out. And so with that, I'm introducing Pete Ferguson.
Awesome.
How are you, Pete?
No, great. Thanks for having us, Francisco. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And then Desiree and Evelyn will introduce themselves in a moment. But Pete, I would really like for you to talk about this project. I believe this is the first year that you had them do, kind of like a movie behind it, a documentary.
Yeah, no, I think it's been a long road coming, and it's actually the first year we've ever had a documentary, so to speak, made of anything that we've done. But it's a variety of different components. The rally itself started in 1993 under the guidance of the late Dr. Leola Bullock, who was a longtime civil rights leader here in the community. And those who've been around or not been around have heard Dr. Bullock's name and Dr. Shanks. And under the good fortune of her, she saw the vision of wanting to empower and elevate scholar voice, but also recognizing there's going to be a time in the near future that a lot of those individuals who were familiar with Dr. King and the social justice movement of the, not only just the 60s, but the 40s, the 50s, the 60s that needed that legacy, and those that mountaintop that needed to be achieved needed to be done by other individuals, and that was the young people. And so her, Ms. Stokes, Ms. Mays, Dr. Jake Kirkland, Chantal Fu, a number of individuals saw the Youth Rally and March as an opportunity for scholar voice, and would have a rally and a march every year in conjunction with the national celebration of Dr. King's Day. It was a program that was unique. It promoted the life and dreams, not just the dream, but the dreams of the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Dr. Leola Bullock, through Positive Youth Action, which you see here with Desiree and Evelyn sitting before you. And it was a tremendous showcase where it empowered, educated, but also entertained. And I think that's the unique part about it. It's a one of a kind in the country. There's other celebrations and youth showcases, but what's nice about this is it's entirely youth planned, but it's also, there's no adults that speak. And so within that, there's music, there's poetry, there's original pieces, and then within the last probably 14, 15 years, we always look for unique components, and through that came an idea, to be perfectly honest, off a number of different things, I had to reflect on how this came about, but Clinton Elementary had a thing called Big Words, Strong Words, and Willie Banks had every year had them do a book about Reverend Dr. King, and it was a phenomenal play and skit that they did, that they went across the community and did. And also, I remember I had a daughter, Jaden, and I remember my mom every year, she was a 40-year-old school teacher, and every year she'd give that gift, not an Atari, not a Commodore 64, they're too young to know what that is, but a PlayStation or whatever, every kid wants it for Christmas, but she would always give my daughter a children's book. And I just reflected on this a couple weeks ago, but she would always give her a children's book, and she would sign and put a message in it. And we still have all those, and that to me kind of where this kind of started was giving her a book that had it was a reflection of her, and it had scholars of color and diversity in it, and so through that project we kind of had, there was a group at Belmont, Ms. Ehrlich has been a part of, but again for 15 years we've had this group of leaders at Belmont, and we looked for a way after the group got done with their leadership opportunity to actually put something into action, and it became this book project. And so each year we invest, and they create a book project with no promises of getting into the rally in March.
Right.
But it has been truly something that's been phenomenal, where it captures the essence of not just telling a story, but they're showcasing a story that many people have lived. Right. Whether that's the Birmingham Children's March, whether that's the power behind the song of We Shall Overcome, whether it's a book about being undefeated. And last year was just a unique opportunity that built upon the many years before, that they did a book called This Is the Dream, and spoke about the hopes, desires, and wishes that each and every one of us want for our children, but more so what we want for the city, the state, and the country, and the world as a whole.
Well, so I did have the opportunity to watch the documentary, and let me tell you, first of all, how impressed I was by the leadership of the scholars. I was like, wow. And then the involvement of the teachers, of yourself, and I mean, it's real, like the emotions, what we hear, I mean, it's history, and to see how everybody worked together to make this it's a dream. It's to come true and to see everybody go forward and be strong and to learn the lines and to see the process of making the decision of what to do and then how to practice it and how to implement it. And so, Bobby, I don't know if you want to share your experience and how you and Pete worked together on this project.
I've been blessed to collaborate and partner with Pete both as a professional, and also I was honored to be Jaden's teacher in 5th grade too. So as parents and educators, and I've grown personally through the experiences and professionally as I learn with and from Pete, but most importantly from the scholars, as you were just speaking of, the opportunity to collaborate and to experience opportunities where you see young people live their legacies and they don't have to wait till they're 25 or 35 or 55 years old. They're finding their voice. They're having the opportunity to take what they learn and put it into action each and every day. I thank Pete for taking myself and all of these scholars on this journey that will have changed our lives forever. And it changes the culture and the family essence of being a part of the Belmont Cougars.
Absolutely. And so we do have two scholars here today. I'm so happy and proud to meet you both, Desiree and Evelyn. And so I'm going to start with you, Desiree. If you could please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. My name is Desiree Chavez. I currently attend the University of Nebraska studying business administration. I like to identify myself as a young, proud Hispanic woman. I like to say that my purpose is to learn as much as I can. I feel like knowledge is very powerful in this world. And I definitely try to insert myself in as many opportunities as I can and to learn as many topics in life as I can.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Evelyn.
Hi, my name is Evelyn Ungere, and I was a part of the tracks, the track program, and I currently attend Park Middle School. I just started this year, and I am very happy that I have this opportunity to be a part of this school. I really enjoyed the teachers, and they really blessed me with the opportunity to learn this knowledge, and I really want to take this knowledge and do something with it in the future. So, yeah.
So it started, either one of you is welcome to answer, but what do you both think? As you know, as adults, we think we know everything, and we really don't. We think we've learned everything, and we haven't. And one of the things that I think as adults we ignore is the fact that as young scholars, young people, you do have your thoughts and emotions. So, you know, and either one of you can answer, but what would you say to the individuals who, because of your age, you feel like you have learned, especially from like the young scholars and the program, the youth rally. Explain to us what that is like for you to learn that in such an early age and what your emotions are about it.
I feel a lot of times people try to discourage us by our age, but I feel that intelligence does not have an age requirement. And I feel that, you know, us firsthand witnessing all the events that have occurred in society, it's kind of forced us to understand these events, even if we did not want to. So I feel like we definitely understand what's going on at any age group.
Wow.
Yeah, I agree with this because, so like how Pete Ferguson said when I was in this group, people try to push us down when we're such at a little age, but when we understand these events and how they occurred and what we can do to make our daily lives better and learn from it, you can really think back then and say, oh wow, these people did not treat these other people kindly. What if I go and help this person? What if I would go tell this person what to do if they're doing something wrong? So it's really about, like, at a young age, it's fine. At an old age, at a medium age, it doesn't matter. It just matters that you're doing something to help the community, and that's just what you would do.
So we need to pay attention more to young individuals, I think. Wow, that, it's the maturity level. It's incredible that you both have. It's wonderful. So I think we have a lot to learn.
Right.
And that also says a lot about you, Pete, and Bobby, about what you've taught the scholars. And so with that, we are going to take a moment and we're going to watch a snippet of that video and see how the scholars actually came together and made this documentary that is well known right now across, at least in Lincoln. And I know that it's being seen in so many places, but we would like to play that video for you now.
If you can spur people to want to know more and learn more and then do more and be better, that's what we want this to do as well.
Every year I think, I don't think we're going to make it. And we have never not made it.
What we do every day is way more than just a math lesson or a writing lesson. Hopefully it's for life.
It's going to change the world, really.
Even today, yesterday, in 2021, there is still segregation. The 2021 Belmont Track Scholars bring to life This Is the Dream by Diane Z. Shore, Jessica Alexander, and illustrated by James Ransom.
This is the dream.
Our nation was founded on the belief that all men are created equal. I'm here to represent a struggle that has gone on for 300 or more years.
However young you are, you have a responsibility to seek to make your nation a better nation in which to live.
We are the diners who have sat and who have waited at white. White only counters ignoring the hate.
Honestly, I just felt like I want to cry. I was so pleased, so happy, so emotional.
We embraced our power. I introduce to you Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I remember that Monday morning that I was able to be in court, chief defender.
A lot of people don't think that younger kids are capable of understanding everything that's going on in the world right now.
I want you, yes you, to take steps with me for justice for Breonna Taylor. I walk together, taking 2.23 miles of steps of kindness, honoring Ahmaud Arbery.
This is like living proof that they do and that they're acting in it as well.
We must walk together for 8 minutes and 46 seconds for equality for George Floyd.
So many people think, oh, they're so young, they can't understand this, but they do. They live it from their hearts and souls. They brought it, they shined, they empowered, they shared their voices, and they delivered the inspiration that the world needs.
Let us be sure our hands are clean in the struggle. Let us never fight with falsehood or violence, hate, malice, but always fight with love. We will be able to live with people as their brothers and sisters. No seat, no ride. No seat, no ride. What did we say? No seat, no ride. Yeah!
Sincerely, I'm so glad. I did tears up. It shows that those kids, they have what it takes.
Even when the words not seem harsh or offensive, the impact is still shattering.
It's just amazing to see the things that she wants to do at this age, and I'm so very proud of her.
What each of us must come to realize is that our intent always comes through.
If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep on moving forward.
And so as I weep now, it's because I think back to what I saw, and they believed every word. And then to see them say, we're not finished yet.
But I'm not done yet.
And they said those 8 affirmations.
I love myself, I believe in myself, I'm proud of myself, I'm
And when I see that, I know there's hope for the future. I'm convinced that there's hope.
Thank you, everyone. What an impactful message the LPS students, Pete Ferguson, Bobby Ehrlich from Belmont Elementary School send. Every year they work very hard and diligently to have a performance ready for the community here in Lincoln. And it is always my pleasure and to meet with Pete and the students and the teacher, Bobby, because they have such an impactful message. So I would like to thank them so much for taking the time and doing that. Next, I would like to introduce Joe Wilson. He is the state, local, and tribal program manager from the EEOC, which is the Employment Opportunity Commission in St. Louis District. And he will be presenting hot topics on employment discrimination law, including issues relevant to national origin and LGBTQ plus discrimination. So welcome, Joe. How are you today?
I'm fine, and it's a pleasure to be here today.
Thank you so much. So Joe, if you please like to introduce yourself again, and love to hear what you have to present. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, it's a pleasure to be here with all these great young performers, young activists. And Mindy had asked if I would do a couple topics that are hot topics in the Lincoln area. So I'm going to talk about Title VII in general, but also focusing on issues of LGBTQ and some issues regarding national origin discrimination. My name again is Joe Wilson. I'm with the St. Louis District Office of the EEOC. Our district covers the states of Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma, and the southern counties of Illinois. And we have 3 offices in our district, the St. Louis District Office, the Kansas City, Kansas office, and we have an office in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. So I am going to start my PowerPoint presentation here. If there's questions, certainly feel free to interrupt. I'm going to, just a minute, let's see. Okay, can everyone see my screen now? Good, okay. As I mentioned, I want to talk about in general about Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, and that encompasses a couple of specific topics I'll get onto later, which are LGBTQ discrimination, as well as some issues of national origin discrimination. But I want to do just a quick overview of what we cover at EEOC and what Title VII of the Civil Rights Act particularly covers. The EEOC was created in 1964 by an act of Congress after the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. We are an independent federal law enforcement agency, and we resolve complaints of employment discrimination. I mentioned that we're in the St. Louis District office here, but we do have 53 offices nationwide. Our role is to enforce the federal laws. We receive and resolve complaints of employment discrimination. We resolve those through mediation, investigation, conciliation, and litigation. Our authority and our role, the EEOC has the authority to investigate charges of discrimination, and our role is to investigate and fairly and accurately assess the allegations in a charge and then make a finding. When we do make a finding that a violation has occurred, we do try to resolve that through settlement. And if we're not successful, we do take some of those cases to court by filing a lawsuit. We don't necessarily file lawsuits on all cases, though, that we do find violations on. Here's just a summary of some of the laws that we cover. Again, I mentioned Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. We also cover the Equal Pay Act of 1963, the AIDS Discrimination and Employment Act of 1967, the Americans with Disabilities Act, as well as the Amendments Act, the Civil Rights Act of 1991, the Americans with, again, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, and the Lilly Ledbetter Equal Pay Act. The Rehabilitation Act deals with only federal sector employees. An overview of some of the bases that we cover. We cover race, color, disability, genetic information, religion, national origin, sex discrimination, age discrimination, and retaliation. Retaliation is defined as somebody who makes a complaint of discrimination and then some type of negative adverse action occurs to that individual. This is an overview of some of the charges that we've received at EEOC. We have the data from last year, which is fiscal year 2020. If you look at the percentages, I won't go through each one, but by far the highest number of charges we get that include the basis of retaliation. And again, retaliation is where an employer takes action because a person engages in protected activities, such as complaining about discrimination or filing a charge with the EEOC or filing a charge with one of our local fair employment practice agencies, such as the Lincoln Commission on Human Rights. Next, in terms of how many charges we get, is disability, followed closely by race discrimination. The obligations of employers are to make the workplace free of unlawful discrimination, harassment, and retaliation, and they are obligated to promptly and confidentially investigate those complaints of discrimination, harassment, and retaliation. Where discrimination, harassment, or retaliation has occurred, employers are obligated to take appropriate and prompt remedial action. That could be discipline, could be up to taking an adverse action up to the point of firing the individual. Some of the discriminatory practices that EEOC does cover include hiring and firing, compensation, assignment, transfers, promotions, layoffs, job advertisements, benefits, pay, retirement plans, and other terms and conditions of employment. We also include cases of harassment on the basis of race, sex, religion, national origin, color, disability, or age, and retaliation against an individual who has engaged in protected activity. In addition, we do cover associational discrimination. That includes denying employment opportunities because of somebody's marriage to or association with somebody who is of a particular race, religion, national origin, or an individual with a disability. In getting over covering Title VII, again, it covers race, color, sex, religion, national origin. And in terms of the sex discrimination, what falls under sex discrimination for EEOC includes pregnancy discrimination. It can include gender discrimination, sexual orientation discrimination, and gender identity discrimination. And now I want to focus on the issue of LGBTQ issues and discrimination and best practices. Some important terms, I won't go over every one, but in terms such as a sex assigned at birth, which may not be the same as the person's identity, sexual orientation, gender, gender identity, and gender expression. And in terms of other important terms we look at is transgender, generally individuals whose gender identity does not match the sex assigned at birth. Gender dysphoria is a clinical diagnosis in psychiatric manuals for symptoms causing significant differences between sex assigned at birth and one's gender identity. Transitioning is a term used involving taking steps to change your gender expression to match your gender identity. That can include medical procedures, but not in every case. Some people do not have surgery, but still identify by a different gender. And finally, gender nonconforming is a person whose gender expression is different than that associated with their sex assigned at birth. In terms of discrimination against LGBTQ individuals, one study found that 21% of LGBT employees reported discrimination in hiring, promotion, and pay, and the rates were even higher for transgender employees. And this goes over certain types of discrimination, harassing conduct that they have experienced on the job. The benefits of inclusion include it allows employees to be more themselves in the workplace. It indicated in one study showed that LGBT employees report spending up to 10% of their time hiding their identity at work. So being more inclusive will attract more applicants and reduce turnover for employers. One study did find that 1 in 10 LGBTQ employees have left their job because the environment was either not intrusive or hostile to the individuals. Now I want to talk about the major decision with regard to LGBTQ discrimination. That was the Bostock decision. And with that Supreme Court decision, it did indicate that Title VII prohibits employment discrimination because of your race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. Well, again, this was before Title VII, before Bostock, I should say. But before that, Title VII did not define sex. And we'll get to what happened leading up to the Bostock decision. In the past, some important decisions that EEOC has looked at that led up to the Bostock decision by the Supreme Court was the important Price Waterhouse case in 1989. And in that case, they found that the Title VII violated when an employer denied promotion because Hopkins didn't have stereotypical feminine character traits. Another important Supreme Court decision prior to Bostock was the on-call case in 1998. And in that case, they did find that harassment by persons of the same sex can be sex discrimination. Prior to Bostock, EEOC had taken the position, had gradually done that as well as many courts around the country, that transgender discrimination was sex discrimination, and the sexual orientation discrimination also was sex discrimination. We took that position most prominently in two federal sector cases. These are cases involving federal agencies. One was Macy versus Holder, and in that, EEOC found that Title VII did bar sex discrimination, which includes gender discrimination, including gender identity. And then the other important federal sector decision prior to Bostock was the Baldwin versus Department of Transportation. And in that case, the EEOC did find that sexual orientation discrimination is sex discrimination because it necessarily entails treating an employee less favorably because of that employee's sex. Prior to, as I mentioned, the Bostock decision, most courts did not find that Title VII protected individuals due to their sexual orientation. They often would rely on the fact that Title VII did not specifically mention sexual orientation or gender identity in the actual law. But as time went on, courts began to rethink this position, including EEOC, as I mentioned, in the two important decisions involving Macy versus Holder and Baldwin. Leading up to the Bostock decision, there were actually three cases. They were consolidated, and we use the term Bostock to refer to all three, but there were actually three cases. Two involved situations involving sexual orientation discrimination. That was Bostock and Zarda. And then the third one involved discrimination because of transgender, which was an Amy Stevens versus Harris Funeral Homes. One unfortunate thing is that two of the plaintiffs did pass away prior to this Bostock decision. Amy Stevens passed away prior to the decision, as well as I believe Don Zarda also passed away in an accident prior to the Supreme Court decision. And just a little background on those three cases. Bostock, again, that involved issues of sexual orientation discrimination. He was a child welfare services coordinator for Clayton County. He ended up being fired in June 2013 for conduct allegedly unbecoming a Clayton County employee. That went through the various courts and eventually got up to the Supreme Court. The other sexual orientation case was Zarda versus Altitude Express. He was a skydiver, and after they found out he was gay, he was fired by the employer. That also found its way up to the Supreme Court and was consolidated in the Bostock decision. Again, he did pass away in 2014, unfortunately, before the positive decision by the Supreme Court. And then the third one is the Harris Funeral Homes case involving a transgender employee, Amy Stevens, who was initially identified as male, but then when she had a reassignment surgery, she was terminated by the employer. And again, she also passed away, unfortunately, right before the decision in Bostock. In the Bostock decision, the court did find that it's unlawful to discriminate based on somebody's sexual orientation or their gender identity. And they found in that decision that the court explained that discrimination based on homosexuality or your transgender status necessarily entails discrimination based on sex. The first cannot happen without the second. One example is if an employer fires an employee because she's a woman who's married to a woman, but does not do the same to a man who is married to a woman. That is taking sex into account, and therefore that is sex discrimination. And as well, it applies to transgender discrimination. If a person is being fired because they identify as male, but they don't male at birth, but uses feminine pronouns and identifies as female, the employer is taking an action against the individual because of sex, because they would not have done that with an employee who was originally identified as male. The decision found that it didn't matter that the intent of the drafters of Title VII didn't reference sexual orientation or gender identity. That was not a factor in the Supreme Court's decision, or whether Congress had previously tried to add sexual orientation and transgender status to Title VII, or whether somebody uses the term gay or transgender rather than using the term sex. That also didn't matter in their decision. Now, the Supreme Court didn't decide certain kind of hot button issues about sex segregated bathrooms, locker rooms, dress codes, and so forth. However, EEOC has taken the position in some appellate briefs that those would be discrimination. Our position is that individuals should be allowed to use the locker room or bathroom of their identified gender. So though the Supreme Court's decision didn't address it, our position at EEOC indicates that that could be discrimination based on sexual orientation or transgender if you're denying that individual their right to use a particular bathroom or locker room of their choice. Moving forward, LGBTQ discrimination is not going to disappear overnight. And here's some important steps to educate managers, supervisors, and employees to comply with Title VII and increase your productivity. They should review their policies and handbooks to specifically include sexual orientation and transgender status. Review reporting policies to make sure they're widely available and easy to use. Review policies on parental leave, adoption leave, childcare, bereavement, and relocation to make sure they're inclusive of individuals. Consider discussing how to help and work with a transitioning employee, including thinking of them through how to implement workplace changes, such as personnel and administrative records. And consider creating work groups to strategize and implement LGBTQ-friendly policies. Of course, training is always important. We always recommend that with the EEOC. But updating training recommends at all levels for employees so they understand the protections that are provided, and for supervisors, managers, and HRs to understand protections, their role in receiving and investigating complaints, and effectively communicating their commitment to inclusion and diversity. One thing that some people may overlook is just your application forms that ask if you're male or female. They may want to consider having another option on those forms and other forms as well. Etiquette in the workplace includes using inclusive language and communications with employees, avoiding assumptions about sex and gender identity, using a person's express name and gender identity, including their pronouns. If dress code is gender specific, consider revising those to provide different gender identities and gender expressions, and consider how spouses, partners, family members are discussed and invited to company events. One, I know it's an ongoing issue about is insurance, and that's come up recently. When you're providing medical insurance, it is a term and condition of employment. And so you should review your medical insurance coverage. One hot button issue is coverage for sex transformation surgery. EEOC, we have filed an amicus brief on that indicates that denying coverage for medically necessary treatment, including sex transformation surgery, is a violation of Title VII. That case settled, so we don't know what the outcome of the Supreme Court, but our position at EEOC is failing to cover insurance if you cover other medically necessary procedures, but not cover transition surgery, that could be a violation of Title VII. I do want to move over to some national origin, moving from the LGBT issues to some national origin issues. In particular, I want to just focus on accents, English-only rules, and citizenship issues today. And Title VII, as I mentioned earlier, does protect against national origin discrimination for those employers with 15 or more employees from discrimination in employment based on an individual's national origin. And that means treating someone less favorably because he or she comes from a particular place, because of his or her ethnicity, or because he or she appears to have a particular ethnic background. National origin discrimination can also mean treating someone less favorably because they're married to or associated with someone of a particular nationality. A national origin group, often referred to as an ethnic group, is a group of people sharing a common language, culture, ancestry, and or other similar social characteristics. Now we get to accent discrimination. That's a part of national origin discrimination, but an employer may not base a decision on an employee's foreign accent unless the accent materially interferes with their job performance. They may consider the employee's accent if the individual's accent materially interferes with their job duties. But this assessment depends upon specific duties of the position in question and to the extent to which the individual's accent actually affects his or her job duties. And in general, the employer may only base an employment decision on an accent if effective oral communication in English is required to perform those job duties, and that individual's foreign accent materially interferes with his or her ability to communicate orally in English. And along the same lines, English fluency, a fluency requirement is only permissible if required for the effective performance of the position for which it is imposed, and it should reflect the actual level of proficiency required for the position for which it is imposed. One example of that, I was thinking of an example of that is for instance, a salesperson who is dealing with the customers and the public. They may require English fluency in that situation. Employer may require that if you're dealing with the public and important communication is necessary. So that might be an example where they could have an English fluency requirement. As opposed to that, there might be situations where they're working in a factory and they're not really going to deal with the public. So requiring English fluency would not necessarily be allowed under Title VII. So we have to look at those on a case-by-case basis. Another issue that comes up under national origin discrimination is English-only rules. English-only rules may only be adopted for non-discriminatory reasons, and it may be used if it is needed to promote the safe or efficient operation of the business. A policy that prohibits some but not all foreign languages spoken in the workplace, such as no Navajo rule, would be unlawful. There are some situations in which a business necessity would justify an English-only rule, and that may be with communicating with customers, coworkers, or supervisors who only speak English. Emergency situations in which workers must speak a common language to promote safety in the workplace, or a cooperative work assignments in which a common language is needed to promote efficiency. Again, the English-only rule, though, should relate to specific circumstances in the workplace. An example of that, for instance, if it's an English-only rule, they can't necessarily require you speak English entirely in the workplace. For instance, we've had employers who would ban speaking their native language during breaks or during lunch periods. That would violate Title VII because that doesn't interfere with the efficiency of the workplace. It also doesn't involve dealing with customers, and it isn't a safety issue. So employers who have a broad ban on any other language beyond except English could be violating Title VII. An example possibly that it would not violate Title VII is if you were working in a laboratory and you're dealing with safety issues and there is a danger imposed, they could promote a English-only rule in those particular settings when other people need to be able to understand that individual. But it has to be very limited. And so again, we do look at that on a case-by-case basis. Moving on to some citizenship issues, EOC in Title VII does not specifically prohibit discrimination due to one's citizenship. However, the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986 does require employers to provide all employees hired after that date, and that for four or more employees prohibits discrimination based on national origin or citizenship. So if we get a case involving specifically citizenship discrimination, it would be referred on to the Department of Justice. But we also may overlap on that issue when it deals with national origin discrimination. For example, if an employer is requiring a citizenship requirement for somebody who's Egyptian but not British citizen, then that would violate Title VII because they're treating someone differently from Egypt than they are from Great Britain. But again, in general, citizenship requirements don't violate Title VII unless we can show disparate impact, that they are treating one differently from a different nationality. And as I mentioned, the Immigration Reform and Control Act does prohibit employers with 4 or more employees from discriminating because of their citizenship status with respect to hiring, referral, or discharge. So when we do receive complaints on that, we would refer those cases on to the Department of Justice. Okay, sorry I tried to rush through that, but wanted to get there within my time. But if there's any questions or from Mindy or any of the public, I'd be happy to answer those.
Joe, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So given that yesterday was International Pronouns Day, when would an employer not using an employee's correct pronouns amount to illegal discrimination?
I think we'd have to look at it in what the intention of the use of the pronouns. Obviously, more and more people are aware of the importance of using it. Maybe a few years ago they weren't, but I think most employees now are aware of that. And it would depend on an intentional use and a pervasive use. It would fall under what we would consider a hostile work environment under Title VII. So if an individual makes an error here or there and using the wrong pronoun, in itself, that probably does not violate Title VII. But if it's an intentional after they've been corrected more than a few times and they continue to do it, that could rise to the level of a hostile work environment and could violate Title VII in terms of sex discrimination.
Okay. I think you can hear me. You mentioned limited exceptions that would allow for English-only rules in the workplace and gave a laboratory setting as an example. Could you provide any more examples of what an English-only rule may be appropriate?
Well, again, it would be situations they look at in terms of dealing with, for instance, customers. If you're having to communicate with customers who only speak English or other coworkers, or safety issues, that's a big thing in terms of being able to clearly, if you're in a factory and you're moving heavy equipment and you need to be able to tell other individuals, you know, if you have some dangerous machinery, you need to let them know and they don't speak English, that could be a problem. But again, you can't ban the individual from not speaking their language in other parts of the job. You can't ban them from speaking, for instance, Spanish during their lunch hours or their breaks. There's nothing in that time period that would interfere with safety, with the efficiency of the business, or with, you know, they're not dealing with customers. So in general, an English-only rule cannot be broad. If they're going to have one, it has to be very specific to a particular time period of the workday that would affect safety, the efficiency, and dealing with customers. Does that address that? Okay.
It does. That's great. And you know what? I had a personal experience, and Maybe some people might have experienced a similar thing at a workplace where one of the things that was said to me is that I wasn't allowed to listen to, in my case, Spanish music in the workplace. Even though at the time we were allowed within reason. I mean, not having it too loud so as not to disturb others. Have you ever come across that?
We probably have. I'm trying to think offhand, but yeah, you were correct. If they allow others to have, now if they have a general rule, they don't want music played, that's fine, but they can't isolate one individual's music because it's a Spanish speaking against somebody others who's English speaking. So you're correct. You can't treat one individual differently if you're allowing other individuals in the workplace to play their music. So yes, I believe that could violate Title VII.
That's great. Thank you, Joe. Along those same lines, when would an employer be able to treat an employee differently because of their accent?
I believe the only situation, in terms of accents, it's not English only, but it would be a situation, for instance, let's say they work at a call center and they're answering customer calls. And if there is we have to be able to show that. It can't just be a perception that somebody may not understand them. Somebody, a manager may think, well, they're not going to be able to understand you. I don't think that's enough to justify not allowing somebody to work because they have an accent. However, for instance, if the accent is very strong and they're dealing with a lot of English speaking individuals on the phone who cannot understand them or make complaints about them, then you might have a situation where that might be a legitimate reason why they want to consider the accent. Again, it depends on the type of job. If you're working in a factory, if you're working in lots of different jobs, an accent shouldn't interfere with your job duties. But there is a limited area in terms of communication with customers that it might legitimately interfere with the efficiency of that business. And again, that's why we have to look at everything on a case-by-case basis. We can't make general, decisions on it. We'd have to look, how does that affect that particular job?
Thank you so much, Joe. Sure. We appreciate your time and being with us. It's been awesome. The information, I mean, it's a lot of information. So
yeah, I'm sorry. Put that in real fast, but yeah, that's good.
No, that was great. And, we do appreciate it. What I was going to tell you is that as the audience are listening, to not hesitate to reach out to you or to us, and we can certainly connect them with you.
Oh, yes, of course.
Absolutely.
And we do, and if anyone is interested in outreach events by EEOC, I know with COVID, we are more limited, but we are certainly doing a lot of virtual outreach to the public. So anyone who is interested, feel free to contact me and I can refer them to our outreach coordinator. And we're still doing our outreach. It is more virtual, and hopefully sometime next year we can return to more in-person outreach events. But thank you. I really appreciate that because I think we really are encouraging more outreach, and I would welcome anybody who has, if you're an employer and want us to come and do outreach for that, please contact us and let us know.
Great. Thank you so much, Joe. Appreciate all of that information.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. So shifting gears now to hot topics in housing discrimination law. We would like to welcome Steve Tomkowiak. It's such a pleasure to have him here. And he is the Executive Director of the Fair Housing Center of Metropolitan Detroit and a fair housing trainer for the U.S. Housing and Urban Development National Fair Housing Training Academy. It is a mouthful, but it is so awesome and such great information. We are lucky to have him. He's a busy man. And so, Steve, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. We would certainly love to hear some of the topics on discriminatory evictions. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. First of all, I put together a PowerPoint in that, but feel free to ask questions, cut in, whatever, you like to do. Okay. And hopefully this is pretty helpful. Thank you, Francisca, for the opportunity. And it looks like I can share my screen okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me see. This okay?
Yeah.
So we're going to look at identifying and addressing fair housing issues that underlie eviction filings. Um, First off, what fair housing centers do, we're funded by HUD to do enforcement, fair housing enforcement organization. So our job is to be engaged in complaint intake, investigation, testing, and enforcement of meritorious claims. So that's what we're supposed to do. So if you get complaints, I don't know if you reach out to, I think you have one FIP that you use. I think they cover 2 states. So I don't know if you use them for testing, but you're free to do that. It's nothing wrong with doing that because testing isn't dictating a response, it's just getting information as to what the actual housing practices are. If the information ends up clearing or showing, that the housing provider is not engaging any kind of discriminatory conduct, that becomes just as available and admissible like any other evidence. So it's not there. Testing is not a form of entrapment in that. At our state, we get like no requests from our state FAP. Why, I don't know, but they don't. This doesn't apply too much when it comes to eviction because in eviction cases are really not susceptible to testing. It's hard to test an eviction. I suppose conceivably you could have 2 tenants matched up and then engage in certain rule violation or pay their rent late or whatever and see if they get different treatment. I've just never seen it. So pretty much is non-existent when it comes to eviction cases. Other types of testing for example, at the application stage can be relevant in an eviction case and admissible, although it doesn't have the same weight, right, than it would, for example, testing at the application phase, doing with the ultimate decision of whether tenant applicants are being screened, for example. A lot of this got attention through Matt Desmond's famous book, Evicted, and his conclusion was eviction functions as a cause, not merely a condition of poverty, meaning the eviction process can plunge people into debt, poverty, homelessness. So it's not necessarily that they don't have the funds, but eviction can be a cause of the problem, not merely the result of cause of poverty, not merely a result of it. And I have a video. I don't know if I'm going to play his video, but he talks about that a little bit. If you go to Eviction Lab and he'll discuss it. I don't know can you hear this? I don't know if you can hear it. Okay, you can? Okay.
We often think about older age.
If someone suffers discrimination, employment discrimination, and they lose their job termination, they go back home, they may file a complaint or whatever, and then look for other kinds of work. But if you get someone is evicted from the home, they're out. It's a different stakes involved. It disrupts more directly communities. There's health consequences. There's education consequences. There's a variety of things that happen during an eviction process. So anyway, the Eviction Lab got started in 2017, and they came up with a nationwide eviction database. I pulled out Nebraska's. It's slightly below the national rate, 2.83%, but the poverty rate, 8.75%. Percent renter homes, I'm sorry, that's wrong. It should be 37.6. But here's the thing that kind of put a red flag out is the rent burden is 27%. So you have a significant population, significant percentage of the rental population that is burdened with high rent. And Omaha is 72nd of the large cities in terms of ranking with the eviction rates. I won't tell you where our numbers are. We have Warren 8.08%. That doesn't mean 8.88% over just a 5-year period or whatever. That's 8.8% each year. In some areas, I saw one city, we had 48% eviction filing rate. It doesn't mean someone got put out. That's just the eviction filings. Fact of the matter is there's a number of people that just move out before the case even gets filed. That won't be counted in the data. So I can't come up with a specific number in terms of what the actual eviction rate is because we don't know what the circumstances are. If people get forced out, they just up and leave. What we do know, Zillow and others show it, that once rent reaches an affordability, there's thresholds where it starts to increase at 22%. Also, it increased at 32% thresholds. Those are the two biggest ones. Once people get much over the 30% range, 30-40% range, where it's a percentage of their income, then they're really housing instability, housing insecure. They're on the edge. If something goes wrong employment-wise or car repair-wise or something like that, they're on the edge of being evicted. I'm not going to share this one, but there's another video from a woman who really worked as a social worker in that and found herself homeless. So, and I think it's a good video because it just shows that it affects a number of people, not just what we would think of as low income. That can affect a lot of people. And what's often overlooked with it, the connection between discrimination and eviction process. And these are like nationwide numbers. Black households in the past year, 11.9% compared to 5.4% of white households were at risk of eviction. And even as they went up the educational ladder, they still found these differences that were occurring regardless of the educational level. And that's kind of disturbing. You would think as minorities move up into upper income levels that this wouldn't occur. The other part is it has a big impact on families with children. Almost twice as many households with children report difficulty in paying rent within the last 3 months compared to those without. There's also, I almost guarantee it without knowing the specifics, there's a representation imbalance. Some say 90% of landlords have a lawyer, 90% of tenants do not. Sometimes those numbers are even worse in the upper 90%. So there's a great big, some cities are moving toward having right to counsel in landlord cases. Regardless of whether that's implemented or not, some steps have to be taken to kind of address that disparity. And sometimes even the simplest process, I think, correct me, Francisca, I think your office, didn't you have someone there to give kind of guidance during the eviction process, a representative from your office?
Yes, actually we have, and currently we have the TAP program, which is the Tenant Assistance Program, and also the rental assistance through the City of Lincoln, which is helping individuals who, instead of being evicted, trying to keep them in their place and working with the landlord to make sure that they don't go through the eviction process. And then the funds that the city has received through federal money to ensure that we are able to help them with rent and some utilities.
Yeah, we've seen it in
what we're currently doing.
Yeah, Detroit has, in parts of Detroit, much of Detroit is the lowest income in the nation. It's the poverty rate's higher than in New Orleans. Many other factors are below New Orleans or St. Louis. Yet there's one court that handles all the evictions out of Detroit. There's a suburban city that borders Detroit. It has a higher eviction rate. And the question is, well, why does it have that? Well, because there's no one in court to really, either the day before or the day of to really give some kind of guidance. Those programs are effective. Just having someone there to talk to the tenant, to guide them through the process, discuss their options, is of enormous value. So hats off to you for doing it. We see some cities where there's just not that interest in doing that. Just so it's clear, our office serves roughly 40% of Michigan's population. I want to say like 4 to 5 million people. So we have a real large service area. But again, this shows from apartment lists that Black households face the highest eviction risk regardless of education. You would think this would change with educational levels, but it doesn't. It's a real disturbing thing. Often it's not caught. So let me go to young adults are actually experiencing this. More likely to say that they've been treated differently in their search for housing. It's kind of surprising. Look at the young adults. So it's not like it's something that's going away. If you look at the percentage of young adults who are Black, 38% feel that they've been treated differently. Then that's something. So it's still with us. There's still a lot of work to do. So what happens during eviction proceedings? It's kind of a cycle here. The hearings are generally focused on the ground set in the notice to quit or demand for possession. Counsel for housing providers, often they're not even aware of an underlying fair housing discrimination. I'm not painting everybody with a broad brush, but there can be discrimination going on that the attorney, counsel for the landlord is not even aware of. And here's a key one. Tenants are not even asked what they believe the real reason is why they're being evicted. No one ever asked them. They pretty much just ask the question, well, are you behind in your rent? Or, maybe other people are behind in their rent, but they're not facing eviction. That's differences in treatment if it's done based on protected class. Maybe it's for rules violation, but families without children aren't subject to those same rules violations. But those things don't get asked. They don't. Why do you think? What do you think sometimes it's real? What do you think the real reason is why I'm moving to evict you? Yeah, I didn't pay my rent. Well, that's fine. That's probably true in many of the cases. But other times they will tell you. They will absolutely tell you. I've got an emotional support animal. I'm representing the complaint before the Michigan Supreme Court. And months into representing on an emotional support animal case, she's the owner. Her brother has the emotional support animal, and that's why they're being evicted. It's been appealed all the way up 4 levels of courts. It's now before the Michigan Supreme Court. She says, oh, I didn't tell you this, but really, I think the new, at this mobile home park, they really want to evict people who have older mobile homes. They want to make it more upscale, and they just want us out. And what's the character or the nature of the people who are there in the older mobile homes? They're Black. And she feels that they really want Black people out. So we've got an issue before our Supreme Court on emotional support animal, yet the underlying driving force in it is discrimination. And as a result, the other problem is relatively few fair housing claims that are raised during the eviction proceedings encounter various procedural barriers. So we're going to go through some of these. I was asked to do, just a kind of an overview of common kind of eviction cases that can mask fair housing violations. The one I really like to emphasize is the non-renewal of a tenancy. And the action I always hear is, well, they don't have to give a reason, they're non-renewing. The reality of it is housing providers rarely non-renew unless there's a reason. You don't evict or stop terminating tenancies normally if someone is paying their rent or they're not doing a rule violation. So why are they filing? Those are inherently suspect. I should say this, I meant to say at the very, very beginning. When I first started getting into fair housing, like 30 years ago, whatever, I thought, eviction cases were problem cases. And that would be the hardest kind of cases. And some from the housing center said to me, "Oh no, Steve, some eviction cases are some of our best cases." And after all these years, I would agree. Some of the best, strongest cases are the eviction cases. They're a gold mine. I mean, I can't tell you enough. I mean, if it's an employment termination, that's one thing, but kicking somebody out of a house, that's a big deal. Foreclosing on their home, that's a big deal. Evictions for one or more rule violations, I don't know. How are they treating other people for those claimed rule violations? And that could be simply, too much clutter in the yard, violating the parking rules. It could be anything. Okay, go take some pictures for me. Let's see what other people are doing. And what do you find out? Right? They're not being evicted. What's the problem here? Sometimes it's underlying sexual harassment can underlie it. Quid pro quo and sexual harassment. There could be domestic violence could be a driving force, right? Emotional support and service animals. I've done a number of those where they've been moved to evict just because they have an assistance animal. Enforcement on limits on the number of occupants. Oh, you have to go because you now have a baby, so you're going to have to leave. We can't have two people plus a baby live in a 1-unit apartment. Well, it depends on the square footage. It's supposed to consider other factors in the Keating Memorandum, including the age of a child. How much space does an infant take? It doesn't. That would be a discriminatory eviction. And other parts, it's simply targeting disabled and other minority groups. People with disabilities face the harder way to go. I'm working now on a case by an attorney, if you can believe it. Because she had health issues and because of COVID, she lost some of her work. She representing primarily individuals, had difficulty to pay. So she contacted the Salvation Army and they were going to help her with her rent. The landlord would not fill out the form, just simply write the name of the tenant and the amount of the rent and send it back to the Salvation Army, simply a confirmation process that she's a tenant because she had an earlier lease, but the tenancy's been continued on a month-to-month basis. He wouldn't do it. So I said, you know what, let's phrase it, use the word reasonable accommodation in the request, and did that. He still turned it down and said, well, don't send me any more payments. Further contacts, you have to talk to my attorney, and proceeding with eviction because she asked for a reasonable accommodation. So even attorneys are facing this. So here's one case, just example. I was concerned that the judge was not reading the answer, affirmative defenses, and everything else. So I just put a summary at the front of the pleadings. The plaintiff wasn't even the landlord. And the hearing was adjourned so he could address it. Instead, the quitclaim deed went to Winchester Ridge, whatever. But it's still this Alexanian is actually still the plaintiff in the case. Winchester Ridge is not. So there's no proof that it's being brought by the right entity. They never amended the complaint, never took any steps to address it. They didn't get a rental certificate for the home, which they're required to do. Then they received SIRA funds. Look at all the money that they received. And the rent was actually paid through January 2022. They didn't provide anything else with any claim damage to the property. And the last one, really the bottom line is because she has an emotional support animal. We had a prior complaint against the attorney. What happened is there was a emotional support animal case that went on for quite some time. It was before our state FAP. It was not moving really well. So I went ahead and refiled the case. It was, again, in the eviction context. He was being evicted because he had emotional support animal. Him and his partner signed a lease like on a Saturday, brought the emotional support animal and a copy of a letter from Baselin for the emotional support animal. The housing provider gave it to the attorney. The attorney said, file the case. This is what her testimony was. So proceeded to a hearing. He cross-examined her during the eviction hearing. And she admitted, basically, when she got the paperwork, she turned it over to the attorney. The attorney said, file the paperwork, meaning file in court. So then when I filed the case in federal court, they got a new attorney who was representing the housing provider. He turned around and brought a third-party complaint for malpractice against the attorney. And that ended up leading to a settlement. In this case, it's the same attorney who got the paperwork in early September describing about the emotional support animal and the doctor's note and everything else like that. He received it and he's still proceeding with the eviction. So I sent that information yesterday over to our state FAP and they said, yeah, we're going to put the attorney in there as a respondent in the case. Right? He's not getting the point. It's long as, you know, people not following the Fair Housing Act and attorneys not advising people properly. So it matters once you communicate with a party or with their attorney as to what the fair housing requirements are, make sure they comply with them. Let me give you 3 quick examples, then we're going to run through some of the issues that come up in eviction cases. Again, any questions? I can't see the chat. I'm on my laptop, so maybe a little hard to see.
We will read you out some questions, Steve,
Perfect.
so you're good.
All right, here's 3 examples. There's a FaceTime case, assault and battery case, and sexual harassment. On this one, there was a husband and wife. They had a combined income of, I can't see at the top here. Let me move this. Of $300,000, and they were approved as to credit and rental history. So they liked the home, everything was fine. The tenant's real estate agent and the landlord's real estate agent signed the lease. They said it was simply a formality that the landlord would sign it. They paid a security deposit for 1 month's rent. They received the keys and started moving into the home. And the landlord signing it would be a mere formality. But that evening, the landlord, who's based in San Francisco, asked to FaceTime the tenants. Ultimately, he refused to sign the lease. Then he directed the attorney to file an eviction against them as trespassers, which is an immediate eviction as a trespasser. All right. And what did he say? Here's what he said. This is the number to FaceTime, or please provide his number and she can call him. So after, what legitimate reason did he need to FaceTime them? What did he need to know? He had the information on their income, credit, rental history, number of occupants, everything was finalized. Right? So after that, right, say you will call, right, don't have to stop what? Don't have a signed lease. And his agent then, I do want to apologize to you and your client. Sorry for the situation they're in. Sorry for things that worked out this way. I'm sorry if this made them feel like criminals. This is ridiculous, right? And most discrimination cases are based on 2 things. How someone is treated before they knew about the protected class status and how they were treated afterwards. He did not have any reason to need to FaceTime them, but you know what he wanted to do. Here's another one. This is an assault and battery case. There was a confrontation at a mobile home park. The high school student for Black family was a victim of assault and battery. The perpetrators were actually the mother of a white student, another white student from the high school, plus the mother's sister or an aunt of the child. So it's 3 against 1. The mobile home park immediately took statements from the Black family, didn't take any statements from, took statements from the white family, took no statements from the Black family. They immediately issued a notice to evict under state eviction statute, filed the complaint. In the meantime, the prosecutor's office got the information, issued assault and battery charges a couple months later against the white mother for the assault. Then all the way through, you can see it goes through this process all the way through July, April, May, June, so like 4 months it's processing. The circuit court denies injunctive relief. It wasn't until September the jury found the mother guilty of assault and battery. They still did not move to evict the white family. Then we're still delaying with that. And they ended up saying, oh, we're going to hold off until the sentencing remains, and then allowed them to remain until December 1st. Finally, December 1st, the white family vacates the mobile home park, right? This is a clear, the white family is a perpetrator. So why are they such delaying tactics when it comes to the Black family and not the white family? That's outrageous. There should never have been any attempt, and it should have gotten statements from the Black family. The sad part is there were 2 minors involved, right? The high school student and her sister. to see this and see discrimination. I mean, discrimination is bad at any time, but with children involved and them personally experiences, and they're thinking, well, what's wrong with our family? What's wrong with our family? When the verdict came in against, there was actually 2 assault and battery cases. There was a juvenile court proceeding against the white high school student, and there was one in adult court against the mother. The juvenile proceeding was dismissed. It was kind of a sham kind of a trial, very, very upsetting to the family. Finally, when the white mother got convicted, it was a very serious type trial in adult court. It really was beneficial to the daughters, to the black family, to see that justice was actually being done. But for that, I feel for what those kids were experiencing this. This one is a sexual harassment case where the landlord kept hitting on her, sending text messages, wanting to take her on trips. And it got so bad, she wrote on Facebook, I swear, I think I'm going to be kicked and locked in someone's basement. This guy doesn't quit. Something seriously wrong with him. Don't know how many more times I can tell him no. So what happened is he kept doing that, right? Till one day, about a year and a half in, that she kind of, how would I put it, did what she could to get by because she had an elderly grandmother living on the same street. So she wanted to stay at that property. And that's why I think she kind of put up with him, even though he's so inappropriate. And I'm not even showing you all the text messages. There's some that are kind of graphic and just not him exposing himself, but the messages on it are really inappropriate. But so what happened is at some point, he filed, they had an agreement with rent or whatever, and she got behind on the payment. He filed the eviction case against her. They went into court. They made an arrangement for her to catch up on the rent. When she walked out of the courtroom, then there were flowers on her car. Like, oh, don't worry about it. You know, flowers on her car. What happened is then, when you see when on September 5th, is he observed her, a gentleman coming out of her home. At that point, he got really, really upset. Then he sent this text message. Jennifer, I don't want to be your landlord anymore. I'm quitting. I want a better life for myself. I'm selling the house and the land. I'm moving back to Mobile. You can't make me rent to you. Why? Because he felt that she was no longer interested in him. He did not see a relationship as a possibility. So therefore, she had to go. Reality of it is he didn't sell the home. He didn't. He just kicked her out. So that got refiled again. She ended up getting evicted. The interesting thing about it is both times we have 2 eviction cases filed. There's not a shred of any evidence of any fair housing claim. It never gets raised. Nobody asked her. The judge didn't ask her. She didn't have an attorney. It never came up. I mean, you got rank sexual harassment, and it never gets raised. And that's how it is with a lot of discrimination that occurs in the eviction process. It never gets mentioned. It never comes out. We got to make sure we pull it out. Fact of the matter is, there's something that you can do. Injunctive relief is available under all federal statutes. You have, I put down a link in municipal code. There's under the Fair Housing Act. If it's a race claim, you have race, national origin, ethnicity. You have sections 1981 and 1982. Even though some of those 1981 and 1982 don't provide for injunctive relief in the statute itself, by court decision, Supreme Court has always recognized it. But you got to have a plan in place in dealing with these cases. What's the problem with eviction cases? They move real fast, and you have to proceed without all the information that you need. So it's a real challenge, no question about it. I shared this in the litigation course with the training academy, but there's generally four standards for injunctive relief: irreparable harm or injury. That's presumed in a civil rights case once there's a demonstration of success on the merits. Likelihood of success on the merits is a key factor. If you can show that, you can stop an eviction. Then there's balance of harm. If this person is current on their rent payments, I believe you probably do escrow orders, I would think. But that can help preserve the status quo if the money's been put into escrow or paid with the court. And then harm to the public interest. Public interest favors injunctive relief because of the strong policy underlying the eradication of housing discrimination. So it's a low threshold for obtaining injunctive relief. Sometimes people treat a threat of eviction as not quite as serious as an actual eviction, but actually just the threat alone, the notice is enough, even if not carried out. It is a very upsetting experience to a tenant. That's an adverse action for purposes of establishing a violation of Fair Housing Act, right? So that is sufficient. So, well, we didn't go forward with the eviction. Well, you still threaten somebody with the loss of their housing. That's serious enough. If I go back to the one I mentioned with the family, they never were evicted. But the fact of the matter is they were threatened with eviction. How long were they threatened? From March 7th, right, all the way into end of July. That's a long time. And then seeing that nothing is being done at the White family. That was not a barrier, right? They shouldn't have pursued it like that. So here's something you have to think about. You have to plan it in advance. And here's important procedural considerations. Will the fair housing claims be addressed on the merits? I don't know the ins and outs of your procedure. I'm interested in knowing. But here's the problem you face. There's the Anti-Injunction Act, Rooker-Feldman, Younger abstention, res judicata, collateral estoppel. And again, you could deal with private attorneys, you can deal with legal aid attorneys, you can deal with your own office to see, but to make sure that you're aware of these concerns. The Anti-Injunction Act basically excludes federal court out when it comes to stopping an eviction. A court can't do it, right? May not grant injunctive relief to state proceedings in a state court, and that means the eviction court, unless they're expressly authorized by an act of Congress, where necessary in aid of its jurisdiction or to protect or effectuate its judgments. None of those exceptions really apply. So pretty much, you're not going to go into state court or not going to go into federal court to enjoin an eviction. And you can't, party can't do an end around joining the attorney or joining, instead of enjoining the court, can't enjoin the court, but if you end up trying to enjoin the housing provider, that won't work either. You can't even do it indirectly. Another one that's a problem is Rooker-Feldman. In Rooker-Feldman, in federal court lacks jurisdiction to review a case litigated and decided in state court. It's only the Supreme Court has jurisdiction to correct state court judgments. My question is this: when you, if there's an eviction case and there's an underlying fair housing claim in a discriminatory eviction or retaliation, can you raise that? I think normally correct me if I'm wrong, your eviction complaints go into circuit court, but if it's a certain dollar amount, like $52,000 or something, then it goes into circuit. Is that the way it works? Does that sound right?
Steve, most of our eviction matters are all handled at the county court level at the state.
Okay, county court.
Yep.
And so if they're really high volume, then they can go to another court, but pretty much they're going to be county court basically, right?
Yeah, our higher court, the district court, has general jurisdiction. So, we could, I anticipate bump it up, but as of right now, they're all primarily being handled at the county court level.
Where would you put your fair housing complaint? You would file it as a counter complaint, right?
Well, that is something that we would like your help to develop a strategy. We have tried to intervene at the county court level and not had a ton of success yet.
Does the county court have jurisdiction over your fair housing / civil rights claims? Yes?
No. So we would try to intervene to pause the eviction, and we could go to the district court at the state level, or we could go to the federal district court level.
Okay. So federal district court's not going to work because of the Anti-Injunction Act. That's not going to work. So once the housing provider gets to the court first, you're stuck. So you're going to have to do it through your county court, through your county court or through district court. If there is just a fair housing claim without any eviction at all, would you file that in the county court or would you file it in the district court?
It would go to district court, I believe.
And is there any limitation on, well, you have it under your ordinance that where it gets filed? Does it get filed by county court or district court?
It would go to district court.
Do you have any language in there saying that the district court has exclusive jurisdiction, or does it say that?
I don't think so, but I will double check and send you our language.
Yeah, because if it's concurrent, here's my concern. The concern I'm looking at is if you raise it in the county court proceedings, which probably are, I won't say slanted, but probably I call eviction court, landlord court, whatever the name is, I consider landlord court. Who wins in landlord court? The landlord. Who wins in mortgage court or foreclosure court or land contract foreclosure court, right? It ends up being, they just see so many claims that may be not meritorious at some point. It's kind of, I would say slanted that way, but it's weighed that way. It can be differences. But my concern is if you raise it as a defense or affirmative defense, and there's an order of eviction, then that would be res judicata, collateral estoppel over the fair housing claim. It would be lost. So what I do is I file it, I do a counter complaint, and then to use your terminology with it, then I do immediate, I don't put it in the answer, I don't put it in affirmative defenses because I don't want that to ride along with the order of eviction or judgment of possession, however you phrase it. I want that to not be adjudicated. I don't want the county court to rule on it. So what I do is I do a motion for removal. I'm switching our court language with yours. I would do a motion to remove it into district court, file it as a counter complaint, move it into district court. It accomplishes several things. First of all, they rarely get these kind of motions and requests. It just delays the whole process. I asked for a jury demand. I don't think you get a jury demand in eviction cases, but you get a jury demand when it comes to your fair housing claims. I would ask for discovery. I don't think you get full discovery in your county court, but you would probably get it for sure in the district court. So I file all of these things. I even have the proposed discovery, and then the motion hearing is whether to remove that aspect of the case. So then what happens? Okay, well, you're saying, okay, let's say, okay, here's it. Okay, Steve, if your defense is based on someone being evicted because they have an assistance animal, but then you're not even going to raise that before the court, the judge that's ruling on the eviction, well, you're leaving yourself with no defense. That may be the case. But then I have that claim in district court. And often you're more likely to get injunctive relief at the district court level than you will at the county court level. But the point is this: you got to map out your strategy as to how you're going to handle it. You don't wait till the case comes in. You don't have time. So you want to have the research, even little chunks of the brief written, so that when something comes up where it requires kind of immediate type of response, you're good to go. And then you have the standard for injunctive relief, and the irreparable harm element being met because you're able to show probability of success on the merits. So you have all these kinds of things in place. Younger abstention, similar things, right? They under younger abstention, the federal court must decline to interfere with the pending state civil or criminal proceedings when important state interests are involved. Younger abstention isn't raised as often, but that's still a factor. But the big one, again, is collateral estoppel and res judicata. If, I got a couple of our state decisions, res judicata applied to, these are state law claims and fair housing claims in an action brought after an eviction proceeding. You can see where they will apply it. So you want to keep it out of the eviction process. You want to keep those fair housing claims out to the extent you're able to do so. Otherwise, they will see it as you raising an attack on the state court, the county court eviction, order eviction. And so that's what you want to keep it clear from that. And they're going to say, well, you raised it in there and you lost. Well, you don't want to raise it in there. And if you're going to phrase it in your district court, you're never saying that the county court was wrong in ordering the eviction. You're saying that the housing provider was wrong in moving to evict someone and obtaining an eviction because of their fair housing rights or in retaliation for their fair housing rights. See what I'm saying? I'm not attacking what the county court did. You don't want to do it. If you want to challenge what the county court did, you raise it there. All I'm looking at here is we're accepting that they did. We're accepting that they moved for eviction and we're successful in getting the eviction. That's where the violation occurred. And that's what you want to put before the district court. Be real careful about how that's phrased. There's cases refused to fully recognize res judicata collateral estoppel, but there's a number of cases that have recognized this. And I'll be, happy to make this available. Here's what happened in the FaceTime case. I filed race discrimination claims under 1981, 1982, and as a counter complaint, as well as under a state civil rights statute. And I got cited case law showing it's a fair housing violation as a landlord housing provider may not even inquire as to the race of the applicant. There is no reason why a family needed to be FaceTime and then denied the opportunity. A landlord then refuses to sign the lease that had already been signed by both agents and the tenants. Injunctive relief was available, but it wasn't sought. They just decided they did not want to pursue it. Why? It's their choice. So they moved to another home. They had underlying issues. Their son was murdered in that, and I just don't think they had the emotional energy to deal with challenging what had occurred. On the assault and battery case, I filed race discrimination claims under 1981, 1982, Fair Housing Act, and our state civil rights statute. There was no direct case law in fair housing. I thought there would be, like where you move to evict a black family but not a white family for similar rules violations. You would think there would be cases, but there weren't. So I had to go to employment discrimination decisions. There's a McDonald case where there was a fight. I think it was, the fight was two white employees, one black employee, arguably got involved in the same kind of behavior. The company moved to discharge the two white employees, but not the black employee. And the Supreme Court ruled that sections 1981, 1982, really it may have been just a pure 1981 case, it applies, it protects discrimination against Caucasians. That was one thing. That it's an old case. But the other part is they said that did state a case of discrimination, the fact that similarly situated people engaging in the same kind of conduct in an employment setting were subject to differential discipline. And this is a good wake-up call on these kinds of things. How many comparables do you need to make a case? How many comparables do you need? What do you think?
At least one.
At least one. Got to have more than one, or can one be enough?
I think one can be enough.
Right. And that's what that McDonald case, McDonald, Santa Fe, something like that. That's what it says. Yeah, one could be enough, because some people think, well, you got to have a whole lot of comparables. Sometimes there just aren't any. You want to look at all the comparable files that you can find, obviously, but one is sufficient, right? No, at no time should similarly situated people be subject to differential treatment. Similarly situated people, except for protected class status, should not be treated differently. Believe it or not, the judge in that case denied injunctive relief in state trial court. I took it up to a higher court of general jurisdiction. That and our eviction courts do not have jurisdiction over civil rights claims. They rest exclusively in our circuit court. One step up, our eviction court is considered district court, just, different terminology. Our district court would be the equivalent of your county court. Our circuit court would be the equivalent of your district court. So I then re-raised it before the circuit court, and the judge denied it. But then just a counterclaim and up the threat of it made them withdraw the eviction. I didn't pursue it in federal court due to the Anti-Injunction Act and other barriers to relief. But that went into federal court and ended up getting resolved. The management company overall that managed that mobile home park and numerous other mobile parks that basically said, this doesn't reflect our company and the way we do things, and we're going to address it, and they did. So that was, a good result to that at the end of the day. In the quid pro quo sexual harassment case, the sex discrimination claims were filed against a landlord under the Fair Housing Act and our state civil rights statute. And what I did to show liability, I used HUD regulations, an elements of proof memorandum, where it talks about quid pro sexual harassment. And there's, again, two types of it. One is where the victim or the complainant acquiesces, and one where they refuse, right? Does not acquiesce. So this fits under the not acquiesce, and that's why he was moving to evict her from the home, because she was not going to ever go out with him. She was, he saw somebody else at her home. And then she vacated a home after the district court summary proceedings. That occurred prior to when she contacted a Fair Housing Center and retained counsel. So challenging case. So just by that time she had already left, and so the case was filed directly into federal court. There was no need there or possibility of getting injunctive relief. So any questions? I hope I'm okay time-wise.
Steve, I'm going to cut in really quick before Francisca does, to say, like, we're perfect with time, but we don't have a ton of time for questions. I think the most important question that we have for you is, are you willing to do a more detailed, extensive training with us advocates who are helping folks at eviction court to set up our plan of attack, so to speak?
Yeah, I can. I'd have to look at your law and court decisions. I didn't get a chance to do that, but yeah, I can look at that. Yeah, it's important to do it. You got to have a plan in mind and ready to go. You just do.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. I'm going to throw it back over to Francisca. Thank you so much, Steve.
Thank you. Am I on here twice?
Thank you, Steve.
I see two pictures.
So much. Actually, his name is Steve Kowiak. It was great information, a lot of information, as many of you have found out, and it is constantly changing, just like the law is constantly changing. So for that, we do appreciate that. I want to thank everybody for joining us today, including our talented performers, Jules and Peter from Omaha and the MLK Youth Rally, which We Will Not Be Silent documentary, and the scholars of the Belmont Elementary School, and everyone who supported their performances. Also, a big thank you to Pete Ferguson from the Lincoln Public Schools, Dr. Franklin Thompson from Omaha Human Rights and Relations, and their teams for their collaborations. And thank you again to Joe Wilson, Tom Kowiak, and for sharing your expertise and introducing some very important topics that are relevant to our community now and in the future, because things are constantly changing. And again, thank you to the Humanities Nebraska for their generous support. Without their support, this would have not been possible, and their flexibility with making this an event virtual. So regardless of whether it is online, we hope to continue to presenting our youth social justice art. If it's not with our civil rights conference, we will have something certainly virtually in the future. So for those requesting continuing legal education credits for today's training, please email Mindy Rush Shipman at mrushshipman@lincoln.ne.gov, and you will see her email again at the end of this presentation. And also, please don't forget, our Civil Rights Conference will be April 20th, 2022 at the Innovation Campus. You can register via Eventbrite. And before we completely sign off, we have a short message from Wesley Hamilton, who will be our keynote speaker at the Civil Rights Conference, and we're excited that he will be able to join us. And because he wasn't able to be with us today live, he did send a short video for everyone to listen. So again, thank you everyone, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Wesley Hamilton. I'm honored to be sharing with you that I will be the keynote speaker for the in-person event for the Civil Rights Conference in April 2022. So make sure that you stay tuned. Why would it be important to check out who I am and listen to me talk? Well, let me just share that at the age of 24, I was shot multiple times in my abdomen, which caused me to have a T11, T12 spinal cord injury. I'm paralyzed from the waist down for the rest of my life. I never understood that was going to be the best thing ever happened to me. That I had lived my life focused on the perceptions of others, that it allowed me to be defeated, be a product of my environment and a victim to my circumstances. Then I took control of my life. I took ownership of the things I have control over. I've taken my life and transitioned to something amazing, inspiring people all over the world, which I am very excited that I have the opportunity to inspire you as well. So make sure that everyone stays in the loop. Stay motivated and inspired for the work that you're doing, knowing that we are focused on creating change to the communities that we represent and the communities that we want to reach. But it starts with us. If we want to be the change in the world, we have to begin with ourselves. I'm truly honored for the opportunity, and I cannot wait to see you all. Remember, love yourself first and then pour into others with your overflow. Wesley Hamilton. See you soon.